Hello and welcome to Louis Philippe in Pursuit of Excellence. I'm at the spectacular Malibu Racket Club here in Malibu, California, home of the stars. My guest today is arguably the most talented player who has ever played the game of tennis, John McEnroe. Thanks for being with us.
I like the most talented, but does that mean I underachieved?
No,
Because I don't have as many majors as some of these other guys, so I'm getting worried.
We're getting there. I've always talked about the talent bit, and I've obviously put you and Nastase up there as the most talented players who've ever played the game. Would you tend to agree with me?
Well, I'd like to agree with you, but I mean, obviously, when you look at Federer now, I mean, to me, he's the most beautiful guy, and we were the craziest, maybe. I mean, if you combine crazy and talent, I think we were high up on the all-time list, but overall, you see the level being played at a speed that we didn't think or envision it was going to be quite that fast, and so I look at Nadal, Federer. My idol was Laver. I always put him at the top, and Sampras. Those four, to me, are the greatest. We try to use our talent as positively, I think, as often as possible in Nastase and I, but sometimes we veered off in a weird direction.
No, but I mean, if you look at the way you guys played the game, and you look at the way children are taught to play tennis today, you always tell kids, you can't teach a person to play like John McEnroe. He meets the ball so early, his talent just comes off, his racket is like a wand in his hand. Peter Fleming saying the best doubles player you can ever play with is John McEnroe, with anybody, and so on and so forth. So the talent element of what you brought to tennis was quite awesome.
Well, you know this from your own experience, that back in the day when we were, you're a little bit older than I am, but 3 of the 4 majors were on grass, and the courts weren't in great shape often. So a lot of times you would feel the necessity to take the ball early and take it in the air so you didn't have to worry about a bad bounce. And so that's the style that most of us were taught. Nowadays, court's much better, it's firmer, it's truer, so guys take these wild swings that back in our day we wouldn't even thought of doing. So the game has evolved, and I think it's better overall because you saw Sampras and Becker, they served so incredible. And I mean, I even remember back in I don't know, you'll remember this better than me, but my idol, Rod Laver, was playing a guy by the name of Vijay Amritraj at the Forest Hills. And my recollection, it was like 71, 2, or 3, one of those. And he was up, if I'm not mistaken, 4-2 in the 5th set, upon which time he decided to put spikes on, which would be unheard of that a player could even think of doing that now, and that you subsequently win the last 4 games and won. And I was like, spikes are terrible, man, because he was my idol and I loved him, and I don't know how accurate. Is that fairly accurate?
Absolutely, spot on.
Is it?
Spot on.
That's
he
good.
had a break, actually, 3-2 and a break in the 5th.
Okay.
And then ended up wearing spikes, and that's exactly what happened.
And for some reason, even though it was wet and rainy, you sort of stayed with it, and
Yes.
the rest is history.
I'm going back a little bit in time now about the way you grew up. So we're going to go back and talk a little bit about your growing up in Long Island and in Douglaston. And tell me a little bit about your growing up, schooling, and how difficult was it to play tennis, go to school?
My father was in the Air Force, so the first year of my life I was in West Germany. We moved to New York, and we moved to a couple different places, one of which was in Douglaston. And when I was about 8 and a half, we moved to an area in Douglaston Manor, where they had a club nearby, something akin to like what you see here, 5 courts. Because I loved to play sports, and I played with all the other guys, basketball, football, soccer, you name it, I figured I'm going to mosey on down to the tennis court and see what that has to offer, because my parents joined this club. All they had was swimming and tennis. Didn't like swimming a whole lot, so it's just hitting against the backboard, as a lot of kids do. And the pro there saying to my parents, because they had just started playing when I did, that, hey, this guy can play. You should send him to this place in Port Washington, which happened to be a place where Harry Hopman was, who was his famous Davis Cup captain from Australia. I don't know who the hell Harry Hopman is, but he's like a magical guy. And then just things sort of clicked somehow into place to where I'm speaking to Vijay Amritraj now, today at 56 years old.
When you look back at that portion of your life and you say, at that point in time, were you competitive? Were you competitive at 7, 8, 9, 10 years old?
I would answer that by saying, as a Pope Catholic. I was competitive in everything, including schoolwork and how I did in school. So it got to where I was in grammar school in Long Island. My father grew up in New York City, in Manhattan, wanted me to go to high school in Manhattan, private school. Upon which time, when I went there, I suddenly saw a lot of these more brilliant kids doing work more easily than I was doing. And I remember thinking, this is ninth grade, 15-ish years old. Maybe I should take this tennis thing a little more seriously, because I don't think I'm going to be a Rhodes Scholar. So I started to sort of mix it up. I still, worked hard on the academics, sort of middle of the road, hanging in there, and try to catapult and continue to play other sports, which I think helped my tennis, basketball, soccer, but eventually going to Stanford, which is where my parents always wanted me to get a college scholarship and then play Davis Cup. That was their other big thing. So that was sort of how they molded me. And then I broke out sort of around that time.
1977, you went to Wimbledon as an amateur. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, you came back and went to Stanford. Did you think at that point in time, do I need college? I mean, I'm doing so well in tennis at a Grand Slam.
Well, I was actually 21 in the world when I entered college. So most people were telling me to not go and turn pro. But I wanted to experience what it would be like. I was 18. I wanted to sort of be on my own in an environment where there's other people my age around and sort of have a chance to grow up a little bit on my own and experience something that I'd look forward to. So I think actually, even though I didn't need to do it, it was probably, without question, one of the best decisions I ever made. I was a bit overwhelmed. This happens real fast. I was sent to Wimbledon in 77 because I had had a few points from a tournament that my mentor, late mentor, Gene Scott, had helped me play in Orange, New Jersey. I had enough points to get in the qualifiers for the French. Won a round there, qualified, got enough points that got me into the qualifying at Wimbledon, which got me suddenly, fast forward 3 weeks later, I'm in the semis at Wimbledon against some nobodies named Connors, Borg, and Gerolaitis. And I played all summer. I played about 12 weeks in a row because I was getting special exempts, which I don't even think they have now. But if you made it far enough in singles or doubles, you remember you'd get into the next tournament. And I kept playing. And, suddenly I entered Stanford at 21 in the world. But at that time, actually, I had a great coach, Dick Gould, never told me anything about how to play tennis, but he just knew sort of when to sort of pull back and let me be me and let the other players do their thing. And he said to the first meeting when the team got together, he said, I know some of you guys have played a lot, which was me. Matt Mitchell was a defending NCAA champion. Come back when you're ready to come back and practice. This is basically around September 30th. My first practice at Stanford was mid-December. 2.5 months, didn't pick up a racket. And I just felt like I needed to sort of use that year to not only hopefully win the NCAAs, which I did, but also to sort of knowing that this was when I realized for sure, Vijay, that I was going to be a professional tennis player. And so I got to get ready for this emotionally and mentally, what this was going to entail, because you're on the road 40, 45 weeks a year, and it's a different animal. So that gave me a chance to sort of get my act together when I left Stanford after that 1 year. And I was 16 in the world when I left because I played a few events along with college. And so I was sort of well prepared to sort of embark, even though I struggled the first 6 months on the tour.
Well, we're going to take a short break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Louis Philippe in Pursuit of Excellence. I'm in conversation with John McEnroe. John, we left off at you coming out of Stanford and then, of course, turning pro. At this point in time, come back to the next year. What were you thinking when you turned pro? Now, no more college. You're a professional athlete.
Oh, I was ready. I felt like it was time to sort of lay it on the line. And I'd given myself this year, so I felt emotionally it would take some time, which it did. It's different. I mean, when you're on the road all the time and, your body starts aching a bit, and you're not used to playing at that level, that intensity. My back started to wear down a bit. I was only 19, so I'm like, man, this is going to be a long, tough career if the back's feeling like this at 19. But I made this move with my serve where I went from sort of the normal style of serve, sort of facing towards your opponent, to sort of moving sideways, which I found helped my back, and it also helped sort of disguise my serve and helped me move forward into the net. So that was sort of magic that happened around the Open in 1978. I made a pretty good run to the semis, lost to Connors, Went right after the match to on a plane, got on a plane to play Davis Cup in Chile. It was my first ever match to play doubles. And it's sort of, from there, I started to get some momentum, and sort of all of a sudden my body started coming around, and I started being able to do the things that I'd sort of always dreamed of doing. Because at that time, the US Open had just finished up a run of 3 years on clay. So a lot of American events were clay, and just switching to hard courts would suited my sort of attacking style a lot better. So it sort of all worked together at the right moment.
So you went on to win your first Grand Slam was the US Open, which you won, became the youngest player to win, male player to win a Grand Slam at that time, I think, if I remember correctly.
I'll take it.
Which was outstanding.
Let's not check the history books.
At this point in time, are you thinking, oh, I'm the number one player in America, I'm going to be this great champion for a period of time, and then of course you had that remarkable final against Borg in 1980.
Yeah, I had this guy in the way. His name was Jimmy Connors, and he didn't, he didn't want to give me that number one in the U.S. too, easily. So he battled. So that was one of the first times in '79. Actually January was the first time I ever beat Connors. So I was working hard to sort of try to get to that next level, and but the good part was I felt like he was making me better, because I saw this guy, I never saw a guy try so hard on a tennis court. So I was forced to try even harder than I thought I could. And when you mentioned the Borg match, it was a match in '80 that at Wimbledon where people come up to me 100 times more than any other match and talk about that match. When I won that tiebreaker, that sort of famous tiebreaker 18-16, and then was 2 sets all, I thought I had it. He had won 4 in a row. I thought he'd let down. He would have sort of figured out a way to sort of get negative, or I would certainly encourage that. And I was amazed at how he found this extra gear and resilience and will, and the conditioning was so great. So I felt like he taught me something. It was like I had to do more. And I thought I'd done a pretty good amount at that time. So both those guys forced me to get better, which turned out to be a good thing.
I always say that I was very fortunate to have played in the era of Borg, McEnroe, and Connors, because this was arguably the greatest 3 players that you could have been a part of a generation. So when you look back at that particular era of tennis, of you, Jimmy, and Bjorn, and of course Ivan came a little bit later, what did it do to you as a person?
Well, I mean, my life changed in '77 at Wimbledon when they started mentioning the word super brat alongside my results. So I guess I had been a little difficult then. I got way worse as time went on. But that sort of, the way people viewed me, and then eventually just having these great rivalries, and it seemed like such an exciting time in tennis in certain ways. It was unbelievable. I mean, who would have thought we would be sort of talked about in the same vein, which was my goal, like other sports. That we be equal ground as the bigger sports, particularly in America.
Did you look at yourself at that point in time that I can be one of the greatest that played the game?
I tried not to sort of think that far ahead. That's too cocky. I mean, you need to be that way and believe in yourself and push yourself, but you don't want to say, all right, I'm now going to become the greatest player that ever lived. I would never put myself on a pedestal ahead of Rod Laver, for example. I mean, to me, he won 2 Grand Slams. I try to copy his game. So I would say I just try to be in the same league as some of these guys. I mean, I relate to Djokovic nowadays because he's battled hard to sort of get the respect in this group with Nadal and Federer. I had the same thing with Borg Connors. And then, Murray to me is sort of like Lendl, although Lendl eventually won 8 slams, won more than I won. So that became even more annoying than the times I battled with him on the court.
Now, when you look at guys today, and obviously you were one of very few guys who excelled immensely in singles and doubles, to be able to play doubles with Peter Fleming, and won as many titles as you did. But would you recommend that as part of your growing up as a tennis player?
No, it's a good question now, because what happened is basically Borg was the first guy that proved that you could be an all-time great and not really play doubles. So Ivan, even though he could have played some good doubles, didn't. Sampras won 14 singles slams. Would you say he would have won more? You don't know if that's true anymore. So unfortunately, even though I highly recommend it for young kids, that getting out there helps with sort of returns, serves very important parts of the sport, as well as looking at angles and, how to move and things of that nature that are important also in singles. It's not something that really has to be done. But I think I do see certain players that have benefited. Jack Sock comes to mind, an American who's sort of making a run, trying to break into the top 20, and he won Wimbledon doubles. And that's helped him, I think, part of, play matches, get in situations like that, helped him become a better singles player. And the following year, when I got to the semis of Wimbledon in 77, I lost first round in the 78 Wimbledon tournament there, and I was deeply disappointed. And getting to the finals of the doubles sort of got me back on track a little bit and eventually helped me. And doubles, most of the time, helped me. But, the way doubles is now, it'd be hard-pressed to see many top guys play. It seems sort of it's past its moment, which is unfortunate.
Which is a great shame, I think, Now, coming to some interesting parts of your tennis career, tennis life, at what point in time did you feel that when you used those famous words at Wimbledon, you cannot be serious? And at what point in time did you think that was sort of going to become a very much of a iconic statement?
Probably not long afterwards, because I actually only said it once, which was my first round match in the 81 Wimbledon. And now everyone would come up to me pretty much right, you cannot be serious, the old story, whatever,
Yes.
You're the pitch of the world. My dad used to tell me, he said, look, you can get mad. I mean, he didn't promote this, but he would say, I'm not going to tell you what to do with the umpires, but if you do decide to go after them, don't curse. So I'd come up with, you're the pitch of the world, you're an incompetent fool. And they'd have to sit there basically and take it, which is the other reason you try to get good, because the better you are, the more you get away with it. But this, you cannot be serious, was perfectly sort of safe.
Acceptable.
They were, blood red, their skin would be all upset, and, what's Mac doing? Again. But it was when I went over that line, unfortunately, and when I had kids, I was 27, when I had my first kid, I'd gone over this line where it doesn't sound so good when they have the mic way closer than they do in other sports, and you're saying an F-bomb or something. It's like, well, I'm just trying to be like other athletes. Well, they don't have the mics 2 inches away. So that was where I blew it.
Your book, you called your book, You Cannot Be Serious. And what did you feel when you were writing that book? Did you want it to be a John McEnroe book about the way you felt, about the way you grew as a person?
Yeah, I mean, I think a combination of everything. I think that I've evolved, hopefully, and as time has gone on, my perspective has gotten a lot better. I realized, hey, this wasn't so bad after all. Most of this, it looked like, it was the end of the world. And sometimes you feel that on a tennis court. You just feel like it's all or nothing, and how you are as a person depends on how you do on the court. And so I don't want to send that message to my own kids or other kids, because it's tough enough to be out there by yourself. You feel sort of naked, and if you lay an egg and play terrible, you're like, you want to run and hide. So it's not easy to sort of nurture kids the way I'm trying to do at my academy, or figure out how to handle that. And clearly I didn't do a very good job at times.
No, but when you look back at tennis in the 70s and 80s, and I always say we were fortunate to have played at a great time in tennis, and you look at what it is today, with the greatest of athletes, Federer, Nadal, Djokovic, Murray, and a whole slew of others who are pushing them, it doesn't get quite the same sort of resilience and same sort of viewership as it did in the 70s and 80s, because of McEnroe and Connors and Nastase and Borg and Geralidis and Tanner and all these guys who added so much value both on and off court.
Well, I think, and you were around this time too, that personality was encouraged, and even the 100 guy in the world had some. And I think when the inmates started running the asylum, Nastase first, and Connors, and myself, I think a lot of rules were tight, and I think squeezed out some of that. It's almost discouraged it. So it benefited players to sort of just not show anything. And I think for the most part, I think it's pretty clear that while the level's better than ever, as far as expressing yourself, we need to see more of that. People need to feel something toward the players. They see these amazing pros, they're like machines, but I don't think they relate to them in the way they could or should. But I think the good news is that they recognize that there's an issue and that there's a problem, and so they're trying to encourage these players to express themselves more.
As we look forward to what you have in mind, you have a large family, you commute between New York and the West Coast, in California, you have homes in both places. What would you like to accomplish? What would you like to do?
I think the biggest thing, if I had to pick one thing, other than hopefully being a good father, and my kids, 4 of my 6 kids are in their 20s now, and got 2 teenagers, so they should hopefully be taking care of themselves and doing their thing. But to me, the magic that you were talking about in the 70s, 80s with the sport, I'd like to see come back, and obviously having some Americans, top Americans, winning majors and challenging the likes of Djokovic and Nadal, et cetera, would be like the biggest thing to open the game up. 35 years ago, when I started playing professionally, even a little bit longer than that, I realized that obviously this isn't a big secret, because I'm sure it's true in your neck of the woods too, that it's too expensive and it's not accessible enough for most people. And unfortunately, that hasn't really changed. So I think that is perhaps the biggest problem. Our best athletes in America are going to play American football or basketball, and we need to try to hopefully integrate some opportunity with these kids so that they have the chance to sort of be as athletic as. You look at Murray, to me, in Scotland, he's one of the best athletes, period. Nadal, the same, Federer, Djokovic. Whereas, we're not as higher up in the pecking order. So that would be number one thing, to try to sort of make this game cool again in a way, so that young kids, white, black, red, yellow, want to play it, and then make it more affordable.
Is it possible to get back to the days of, even before you guys, Smith and Ash, and then McEnroe and Connors, and of course then Andre and Pete came along. So American tennis was at its peak. And once Pete and Andre moved on, Roddick did some damage for a while, but not quite in the league of you guys. Can we get back to that?
Well, I think that it's going to be difficult to say get back to the heyday, but anything's possible, first of all. If you had said to me, I bring this up often, that in the 2001 Wimbledon final, Patrick Rafter played Goran Ivanisevic, where both players served and volleyed well, by the way, first and second serves till 8-6 in the fifth, I believe. And the next year, David Nalbandian played Leighton Hewitt, and not one player served and volleyed once. Would you have sat and said that's even remotely possible, that guys would not be serving and volleying at all? So I think that to think what could happen in 10, 15 years is unpredictable. Right now, we're struggling a bit. We have some solid players, but we don't have the greats that are winning majors. And we definitely, here in America, as well as other countries, want to change that.
Final 2 questions, John, just from a standpoint of India and the fact that we haven't seen you in India yet. And we would love to have you and your wife come visit at some point. And I hope you'll make that trip.
Well, that's definitely on my bucket list of things to do. We've talked over the years, and we've gotten close, and it seems like it's got to happen. I mean, the tennis part's it's a little trickier at this point. It's going to be tougher and tougher to make me look good. So 30 years ago, I could have showed these people something. Now I want to show them something.
And finally, when you look at what you can tell the youngsters, and in your pursuit of excellence, that you've developed a role both off court as a commentator and of course on court, and what your achievements have been. What would be, if you had to pick one single thing in your quest, in that pursuit of excellence, what would it be?
Well, I'm going to look into the camera. I think it's there right now, and I'm going to say to the young kids watching, it doesn't matter whether you win or lose until you lose. So because there's some truth to that, even though you want to be a win, lose, or draw, you give your best shot. And to me, effort is what it's all about. And if you give that 100% effort on a tennis court, it's sort of, to me, like a microcosm of life. And I believe that even if you don't end up succeeding as a professional tennis player, you'll end up succeeding in that difficult pursuit of life, Vijay.
That's right.
Heavy. That's heavy way to end this.
That's very true. I was delighted to have played with you and against you on many occasions.
I wasn't delighted when you beat me in the '84 at one of my 3 losses, but I'll still shake your hand.
We had good times. John, thank you.
You can also watch this episode online at louisphilippe.com.